is unprecedented. You would think that a president is taking on this sacred issue that had never been raised, at least publicly with our friends, about their own trading abuses. But there was a time when another president was taking on an issue that was considered not to be talked about in public: human rights abuses worldwide. That president then was Jimmy Carter. Take a look.
Peoples more numerous and more politically aware are craving and now demanding their place in the sun, not just for the benefit of their own physical condition, but for basic human rights. The passion for freedom is on the rise. Tapping this new spirit, there can be no nobler nor more ambitious task for America to undertake.
Now, it might seem a little odd. That was considered quite revolutionary at the time. No one started judging how countries were when it came to human rights or addressing the concern within their own country. That was then. President Carter, the White House years, is the book that goes through that, the highlights and the lowlights. Stuart Eizenstat, a good friend of the president's and, of course, his chief domestic policy advisor, among many other things, joins me right now. Stuart, thank you for returning. I appreciate it.
Neil, it's always a pleasure.
Let me get your take first, if you don't mind, on Donald Trump and what he's trying to do on trade. And I know I'm mixing issues here, but similar to what President Carter was trying to do on human rights, that these were, I wouldn't say taboo issues. People knew they were issues, but they didn't raise them in a public forum the way Jimmy Carter did on human rights back then and the way Donald Trump is on trade abuses right now.
Well, the difference is that we had the support on the human rights policy of our key G7 and European allies, which is not the case with the tariffs. In addition, we used human rights as a weapon, Neil, in the Cold War against the Soviet Union for the hearts and minds of people all over the world, expressing the best American values of support for democracy, support for free speech, reaching out to the Soviet Jewish movement, for the Soviet dissident democratic movements, and we had the full support of our allies at the time. What's happening here is that there is huge bipartisan support at home and very large support among our G7 allies for a joint attack on China's pernicious trade policies. But unfortunately, what the administration is doing by imposing aluminum and steel tariffs under a so-called national security banner against our closest allies is dividing them when we should be uniting them against China. They want to take China on with us. Now, instead, they're going to be retaliating against many of our products because of our imposition of tariffs against those. I have been involved in 4 G7 summits. They're recorded in my book, President Carter, the White House Years. Always under Republican and Democratic presidents, Neil, the U.S. was the leader in the G7 summits. We had a breakthrough in '78, for example, on the international trade agreements, on getting Japan and Germany to lower their taxes. Now we're faced with a G6 versus 1 situation. If you take the tariffs, if you take the pullout from the JCPOA nuclear agreement, right, if you take the TPP, Trans-Pacific withdrawal, Paris, all of these things are dividing us from the allies, and they're making it more difficult for the president to reach his legitimate goals. We need to unite our allies.
I do see that, sir, but what if the president is right on this, that in a lot of these trade deals, including those with our friends, we have been getting, pardon the vernacular, hosed. And even one thing that comes to light when you see one trade deal after another, and this might have just been built into the system decades ago, so I'm not blaming any present world leader or party in either case, but that we have gotten the short end of the trade stick, and the president is responding to that in a way that others haven't. He is like a bull in a china shop, but that it could work. It could extract concessions from them and longer term be good for everyone. You don't agree?
No, I'm sorry, I don't agree. And the reason is, if he were aiming, as he should be and is, at China, which has pernicious trade policies, deep subsidies to their state-owned companies, forced technology transfers, forced joint ventures, even stealing our intellectual property, he could get our allies to join us in going after that rather than dividing us. And if you look at steel and aluminum, right, the excess capacity is coming from China, not from our European allies. And that's where the real problem is, not with the people with whom we share all of our most precious
But do you
intelligence.
think he's using them to get at China and maybe have China think, gosh, if he's going after his friends, imagine what it'll do to us, that there's a method to this?
Well, I've dealt with the Chinese, and I can assure you they would be much more likely to respond if we came in with a solid phalanx of all our allies together to attack these policies than trying to do it separately and ourselves.